You are here because, you've played such a big role in changing the lives of people living with autism spectrum disorder. Your work for years comes from a place, of course, of personal experience, as you've lived with autism yourself for many years. And in your years of work, just for people that don't know how much you've done, you also have done so much work to animal understanding of animal behaviors. Temple Grandin says animals are, quote, visual thinkers, just like her. Her new book, by the way, is called Autism and Adolescence, The Way I See It. Yesterday, Temple Grandin came to Winnipeg to speak at the Leaf at Assiniboine Park. Now, that event was hosted by Autism Manitoba. It was part of their annual fundraising event. And obviously, as you've heard, she's in studio to talk about all of this. How was the event yesterday here?
It was a really, really great event. And I just gave him a lot of practical advice because I've spent 25 years in the construction industry supervising installation of equipment I had designed for the beef industry. In fact, the Cargill plant in High River and the Lakeside plant in Alberta, I designed all the live cattle handling for those plants. And in working in that industry, I worked with a lot of very skilled shop people that were autistic, undiagnosed, owned big metal fabrication shops. And one of the things I'm concerned about is we need these skills. The people I have worked with have retired out, and these factories, and I'm talking about all kinds of factories, just don't have enough people that can do maintenance, because the visual thinkers really good at that because they can see how a machine works. I do a lot of talks to employers, and I have another book called Visual Thinking, The Hidden Gifts of People Who Think in Pictures, Patterns, and Abstractions, that they need these skills. And the visual thinkers like me are the ones that can keep the water systems going, keep the electrical systems going, because they can see how things work.
If someone doesn't understand, Temple, what a visual thinker is, how do you describe it versus another type of thinking?
Well, I thought everybody was a visual thinker until I was in my late 30s. And in my work with cattle, one of the first things I did back when I was in my 20s was to get into the chutes and see what cattle were seeing. And I'd stop at a reflection. And I'd stop at water, just little things hanging down. And the first step is you have to realize that thinking is different. Now, the way my memory works, it's like pictures on your phone. Things that interest me, okay, snap, I take a picture. Do I remember the interior of every hotel room? No. Because that's not very high priority. Unless they're really weird or really terrible, they don't get remembered. But you see how things work. And then a verbal thinker, it's in words, thinks in words. And then you have the mathematical thinker, where they think in patterns. Music and math go together.
You've changed so many people's lives. I mean, I mentioned 12 years ago when you came through. I wonder if you look at the last 10 years, like the last decade, what are some of the most positive changes that you've noticed in the autism community?
Well, there's a much better acceptance now. But on the other hand, I want to work on developing skills. Okay, let's go back to the food processing plant.
Okay.
Who builds the food processing plant? I'll tell you right now, I don't care what kind of food processing plant it is. The visual thinkers are the drafting technician, lays out the whole entire factory, and builds and designs and patents all the mechanical devices in there. And then we need our degreed engineer to do the refrigeration. That requires a lot more math. You see, you've got to have both kinds of minds. And in working in industry, also I've done talks out in the tech Silicon Valley industry. Half those programs are on the spectrum.
In terms of where maybe we need to still do work to help with acceptance, you said there's a lot more acceptance and understanding of in the autism community. What is still a challenge? I heard you think that kids getting off screens is important.
We've got to get them off the screens.
Why?
Because they're not going anywhere. And also, if you want to design video games, that industry is going to get taken over by artificial intelligence. The other thing we've got to work on is making the transition from school to the world of work. We're doing a much better job on the early intervention with the little kids, but I'm seeing teenagers where their parents overprotect them, and they're not learning basic skills like shopping, bank account, just the basic stuff. And then another mistake that was made in the schools is taking out a lot of the hands-on classes, because the people I worked with that were visual thinkers that I know were autistic, people that are my age, I'm in my 70s now, they took shop classes in school. They grew up working on cars. And then a little tiny shop forms that makes some little tiny thing for a factory. The factory likes them, grows into a great big shop.
It's interesting because tomorrow we're live on location at RRC Polytech. We're looking at the trades. We're looking at the increase in people starting to come back to doing the physical things in the trades and building and learning in those ways. So kind of coincides with what you're talking about.
Well, and we need to be hooking kids young. I'm seeing too many kids today growing up, they've never used a tool. I teach a class at Colorado State University on livestock handling, and one of the things they have to do is to do a scale drawing of a cattle handling facility. I had a girl in my class last year who had never used a ruler to measure anything. Yeah, that's not good. We're getting too many students too far away from the practical world.
Autism acceptance has evolved, obviously, but it can mean something different to people on the spectrum. How important is self-acceptance for people living on the autistic spectrum, in your view?
Well, I don't know. I'm more interested in working on the jobs. See, the people that I worked with, I spent 25 years in construction, and worked with all kinds of people, mathematical engineers, shop people, and the career comes first. Autism is secondary. And the big thing I'm pushing right now is I want to see these autistic kids get into good careers. Another problem we have in autism is they've changed the diagnostic guideline. So you're going all the way from Einstein, who had no language till age 3, to somebody who has very severe disability and cannot dress themselves. It all has the same name. And the verbal thinkers tend to get locked into it, and I'm seeing too many parents getting the mindset that their kid can't do anything.
Got it. What about the mindset of employers? How does that need to change?
Well, there's a few simple accommodations. I basically need an external working memory. So let's say I get a job at Walmart. Let me make a pilot's checklist for the 4 or 5 steps it takes to log into the cash register. Because if somebody just tells me that, I have a hard time remembering. Or let's say you've got certain tasks you want me to do that day. Let me just jot them down in a pilot's checklist format. Because I do not remember very well verbal sequential information. Very, very simple accommodation. Another thing that's a problem for some people with dyslexia, ADHD, autism, head injuries, and migraines is LED lights that flicker. And one of the ways to find that is to take your phone out, photograph the room in regular slow motion, you'll find the bad lights. But there's about 10% of all people where flickering lights are a problem. I talked to a lady recently who had to quit a super good job because she was getting migraines, and I think it was the lighting.
In terms of what you hear from people, I can't imagine. I mean, when people read your own history, there was a time in your life when people said you must have brain damage.
Well, I was 2.5. Okay, you remember, I'm 77 years old.
Yeah.
So a lot of doctors know what autism was. So I went into a neurologist, and they checked me for deafness. You've always got to make sure that the little kid is not deaf. And they checked me for epilepsy. I had very severe autistic symptoms. I had absolutely no speech. It's essential to get little 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds that are not talking into early intervention. The worst thing you can do is wait. I'm hearing horror stories about 2-year wait lists for 3-year-olds. That's absolutely unacceptable.
I was raising sort of your, how at 77 years old, like to come from where you started as a little kid to now, and the impact on people's lives is enormous. What do you hear from people about how you've changed their life when it comes to the acceptance of autism and the understanding?
I've had parents come to me and say, my kid bought a house and got married because of you. My kid went to college because of one of my books. Having been a consultant in construction industry for years, I still am that. I take a very practical approach. How do we actually get things to work? And I find out certain accommodations are really important, like the pilot's checklist format. Instead of just giving sequential verbal yacky, yak, yak, yak. I can't remember that. That's really important.
Do you ever let yourself think that if you hadn't had come to these understandings about yourself and then given that gift of understanding to the world, like we wouldn't have had you?
Well, yeah, a lot of people when I was in high school thought I was just stupid and wouldn't be able to do anything. See, I can't do algebra. I can't do higher math. But you know what I found out working in these factories? These brilliant shop people with maybe 20 patents, they couldn't do algebra either because, you see, I can't remember it. I'm concerned that algebra requirements are going to block out a lot of brilliant machinery designers because you're talking about machinery designers that have 20 patents and not silly patents. Good patents on things the beef industry is still using.
Your understanding of animals, obviously, and your connection with animals is also, something that many have learned from and watched over the many years. What's your sense of how that's evolved?
Well, an animal does not think in words. You see, I think some of the basic thinking on this, some people think you have to have word thinking in order to truly have thought. And animals do not think in words. In fact, a brand new study just came out in 2024, was published in Nature magazine, that words are not required for thought. Yep, that's now, like a lot of philosophers are very verbal, and they think, well, an animal can't really think because they don't have words. No, an animal can think, but they're sensory-based. Their memories are things they've heard, things they've smelled, things they have seen.
What do you still want to do?
Well, I kind of want to encourage the kids that are different, get them out there in good careers. That's what I want to do now. And then just my regular students, I'm still teaching at Colorado State University, my regular students, so I want to see them get into good careers they're going to love. I've taken book money and speaking money, and I've used it to put master's and PhD students through school. I have 23 students who've got master's degrees, PhDs with me. I got 3 PhD professors now doing animal behavior research, encouraging the younger generation, helping them to get out and do things, because we need to figure out how to solve problems.
You really are just an incredible person. Every time I've had the privilege to speak with you, it's just I always leave feeling just uplifted, and you do so much work. Did you get a chance to enjoy the city outside of the event yesterday?
Yes, we did. We went to the zoo yesterday. I got to see the polar bears, and I learned something about polar bears.
What'd you learn?
They love romaine lettuce.
Oh,
And I watched them feed them romaine lettuce, and when they ran out of when they couldn't get romaine lettuce, kale or iceberg lettuce, they wouldn't touch that. But they see this carnivore getting fed big pieces of romaine, and why they love that, and it's a treat, I don't know, but they just have a taste for that. That was something new I learned yesterday.
well, we're going to take that and we're going to brag about it. Temple Grandin learned something new about animals in Manitoba.
I learned that polar bears like romaine lettuce. They love it.
Really a pleasure to speak with you. Good luck with your upcoming work, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's Temple Grandin, animal husbandry specialist and autism advocate. She spoke at an annual fundraiser for Autism Manitoba yesterday here in Winnipeg.